Thank you, Liz. Let me flip the page here. All right. So the Lord set on my heart this week this really cool message. And this kind of happens with me. I ask a lot of questions. I get a lot more stuff. And the message grows and grows and grows. So at some point I had this message about three judgments that that are very common that tend to ruin marriages. And I was looking at it and there's no way. There's no way this is a homily. Not with these three. This is a long sermon. I thought, well, I can knock one of I could do two judgments, and then I could do one. So, and I whittled it basically back to the first thing that God was talking to me about before I asked him other things. So this might be a little clunky. I just cut it down to one judgment last night, so um, it just doesn't flow as good when you're talking about three judgments. You can kind of list them, and talking about just one, it drops kind of heavy. So we're going to be talking about that today. And so, Lord, I just ask that you would bless us and give us ears to hear, God, the word that you're speaking to your people this morning, that you be with the hearts of the women here gathered during our service today, and that this word would truly be effective in our lives. Amen. So I wanted to say a quick word about judgments in general before I dive into the rest of it. Everybody has judgments, right? And I think judgments, it's going to sound weird to say that judgments are cool, but I think it's cool when we work with judgments in the church, because there's probably nothing that more sabotages something than a judgment. If you're looking at a relationship, be it your marriage, your kids, your family, whatever, your parents, if you look at a judgment, that's probably, if you have problems, there's probably a judgment in there. And the crazy thing is it's usually not that hard to fix. We take it to the Lord in prayer. We say, I'm judging this person. Here's my judgment, and I surrender it. And we let God give us his judgment. And then we have a choice from that day forward to go with the old judgment or to stand with God's judgment and say, I believe what God says, not what I think. I'm going to behave according to what God says, not what I think. And just by taking that step, amazing transformations can happen. It's one of the biggest turns around you'll see. If you're doing marriage counseling, if you're doing regular counseling, I've done a lot of counseling with people. And when it comes to big dramatic changes in people's lives, usually there's a judgment at the heart of it that gets exposed. And the crazy thing I think about judgments is this. I think in the church, a lot of times people talk about judgments like they're invisible, like, oh, if we only knew that we were judging people, we could deal with it. I don't think that's true. I think we know when we're judging people. I think it's pretty obvious. If you're like judging your husband or you're judging your kid or whatever, I think it's pretty obvious. Like I'm being judgy right now. There's a part of you that's saying, don't say all of this out loud or people are going to look at me sideways, right? It's there. And even more than that, I think we know that it's bad. Not only are we aware this is going to come off to other people as judgy, but I think a lot of times we're like, yeah, this isn't doing my marriage any favors. This isn't helping me parent the kids. Like, this is some sour fruit. It's not good. God doesn't like it. It's obviously hurting these relationships a little bit, right? And I think even more, we also know if I took this to God, he'd probably get rid of it. If I just went into prayer and said, God, let's talk about this, God would be like, finally, right? And things would begin to change. So the real question is, if we know it's there, if we know it's bad for our relationships and sinful, and we know we could take it to God and get it fixed, why don't we? It's a heck of a question when you really think about it. And this is my answer. This is what I was putting together this week. I think what it is, yeah, we know that the judgment is bad on some level, but we don't think it's that bad. We're usually hiding from the full fallout. We're not looking at other examples and saying, well, this person carried that judgment and they got divorced eventually. We don't look at it that way. It's just our judgment. We're only looking at what it's doing right now, and we're not really being honest about what it's doing right now. We're just minimizing it because we've already decided we're going to keep it to a degree. So part of it is we're minimizing it. The other part is we think, what if God took it away? I got this judgment against this person. I think they're a jerk, or I don't think they're doing enough. I don't think they're pulling their weight, whatever the judgment is. And we think we're right, right? I'm judging this person. It's hurting my marriage to look down on my husband right now because of this. But I also think I'm actually right still, you know? So I go, I know I'm being a jerk, but I'm also right. And I know if I go to God, he's going to say, no, stop doing that. But I'm still right. And if I gave it up, what would happen? Would I be a doormat? That's what we're afraid of, which if you really step back and look at it, what is that? That's another judgment, but it's not a judgment against that person. It's a judgment against God. It's saying, God, I don't really think you're the kind of God who's going to take my sin away and give me something better. I think you're going to take this away and it's going to be worse for me. It's sort of what God's holding out on you. It's the serpent's lie, right, from Eden. Oh, if you go and do it God's way, it's going to screw you over in the end. If you give up your judgment, you're going to be defenseless against this person. Your judgment is your protection. It's your foreknowledge. It's your forewarning. It's how you're prepared for this. You got your shields up and you think it's doing something good for you. And you think if I go to God and give up my judgment, I'll be naked to whatever comes next. I'll be totally unaware, just get clobbered. I'm just going to love this person and not judge them. And then what happens when they do it again? And all that is really saying is, I don't think God is really going to honor that decision. I think if I come to God and say, I want to do it your way, he's going to leave me hanging. He's going to take away my way and give me nothing. And so what we really have to do is look at that situation and say, am I a disciple of Christ? Am I somebody who is going to trust God enough to take the plunge and say, look, God, I'm fully aware this is judgment. I'm fully aware that to some degree, I might not be fully measuring how bad it is, but I know it's not good. And I know you would take it away if I handed it to you. And as a disciple of Christ, I need to say, do I trust God enough to do what I know that I should do? And so I just want to prime us with that, because we're going to look at a judgment today. It's a very common judgment that women have against their husbands that God has been talking to me about lately. He's just been pointing it out over and over again in various situations. I see it in the church, out of the church, all over the place. And I think it's horribly toxic. I think I think it's top 1% of damage causing ideas to have in your head when it comes to your marriage and your family. But to be able to look at it, we can't be sitting there and saying, well, whose fault is it that the marriage isn't going good? Or I've preached probably 300 sermons to the guys about things that they need to fix. This is probably the first one where I've really hammered home something to the women. So it's the thing about being a disciple is you got to walk up into the situation and say, I don't care about anything else. I care about, is this true? Is this judgment that's getting preached right now, is this true of me? And God, what do you want me to do about it? And what I can say is, I can't say it's going to fix everything in your marriage. I can't even guarantee you that this is an issue for you. But I can guarantee you, if you take it to God and say, Lord, is it an issue? He'll show you one way or the other. And if it is an issue, man, whatever else you got going on wrong in your marriage, believe me, you get this fixed, if this is actually wrong, and it's going to clear out so much. It's going to heal so much. I get excited, as weird as it sounds, I get excited when God exposes a judgment. I didn't at first. Who really enjoys that? But I've gone through it enough to say, wow, my life improves dramatically when we deal with judgments. So when God says, you're totally misreading this, you're seeing this person wrong, you're in error here, as much as that's bitter medicine to me, I say, let the righteous man rebuke you. Let him strike me upon the head. It's oil poured forth, right? Because where does it lead? It leads to a week from now, my life getting dramatically better. And I think we all would love dramatically better lives, dramatically better marriages, dramatically healthier kids. That's what we're all aiming for. So Let's dive into this. Again, originally I had 3 judgments and I was going to list them, and there's kind of a poetry to that, I guess. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to talk about one judgment. And here's the judgment. And I'm not saying this is for every woman, but I think more likely than not, as a woman in the West, you probably struggle with this from one time or another. I think it's pretty rare for it not to enter the minds of women nowadays. And this is the judgment. Judging your husband for not being as good of a parent as you are. Having a judgment in your mind that I'm really doing a lot better than him. I really put in more time, more energy, more work into this parenting thing than he does. And sort of looking down. Now, I'm not saying that you don't say he's a good dad. I'm not saying that you don't look at you're better than that guy down the street, or you're better than my dad ever was. You might throw him a bone and say some nice things. But overall, this idea that I'm a better parent than my husband is. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, one of the problems with that is, how can you look at your husband like it's a big job to be like, that's a big part of your whole relationship with your husband, is we had kids together. I'm a parent, you're a parent. If he's not putting in the effort, either he's incompetent, which isn't good. You don't want to have an incompetent, or he doesn't care enough to be competent. He doesn't care enough to put in the effort. And so you're looking at, he's not taking care of our kids correctly. He's not giving everything he can. That's bitter. That can't not go into bitterness after a season. But more to the point, how can he even be a good husband to you if you think he's leaving you hanging with the kids all the time? You really need to do more, and you're not doing more. So what? Bitterness. If he really loved the kids, he would try harder. If he really loved me, he would help me out more. And Satan can just play off of that all day long. Just go nuts with it. It can be incredibly toxic. Not only that, but what happens throughout your marriage when you're talking to your kids? You don't think they're going to pick up on the fact that you think that dad's not really that good of a parent. He's not really trying his best. He's not doing as much as me. You might be just making the point, I'm really working hard for you, kiddo. But what are they getting? Dad doesn't really put in the effort. And like most people, what? They're not going to hear your story. You're telling your story. Your story is, I work really hard. Dad doesn't work so hard. They're hearing, Dad doesn't work so hard, and they're putting it into their story. Why? What's wrong with me that my dad's not showing up? It's not what you're meaning to say, but it is what kids will hear. So that's, it's one of those things. The judgment's there. You wouldn't want to say it. You wouldn't be like, hey, I'm going to stand up in the middle of Thanksgiving, say, hey, you guys all know I'm the best parent in this marriage. My husband isn't doing half as much as what I'm doing. You wouldn't say it out loud because it's judgy. And it's sour. You know that there's some sour, bitter stuff on it. You know that God's not smiling on you when you're thinking these things. But again, you don't want to take that judgment to God and lay it out in front of him, because he probably will take it away. And you go, it's true. I mean, it sounds bad, but I am a better parent than him. I just am. I'm a way better parent than my husband is. Those are the facts. I understand it comes off a little bit judgy. Maybe it leads me into judginess at times, but it's still true. And if we threw out that judgment, then I would just be a doormat in this thing. I wouldn't even be calling them out, get to work, change a diaper for once in your life. I couldn't do anything if I let go of the judgment. And so I want to talk about the judgment in itself. Now, the first thing I would do is I would sort of take imagine I had a fairy wand, right? A magic wand, and I could wave it over this statement, I'm a better parent than my husband, and bring it into a deeper level of honesty. If we wave that magic wand over that statement, I think it would change what the statement actually says. I think if we took it fully into the truth, it wouldn't be, I think I'm a better a better parent than my husband. It would actually change it to, I'm a better mother than my husband. See, what I think happens a lot of times is we've developed this idea of parenting. And it's been a slow transformation, but we started to use this word parent more and more and more. You go back into older documents, you go back a few hundred years, they talk about mothers, they talk about fathers, they talk about fathers fathering, they talk about mothers mothering. That's the main vocabulary they use. But you get into the 60s, the 70s, later on, we start using the term parent more and more often. And there's nothing wrong with that in itself. I think that what it's originally used for is they would say, well, when we're talking about the whole thing, here's the father fathering, here's the mother mothering, here's all of this combined thing happening to the, what is it? This is parenting all together globally. We're talking about parenting. They're both parents. Or when you share something, there's an experiential overlap. You remember being up with a baby all the time? Do you remember when they were teenagers and they started rebelling and you have this shared experience with your husband and you go, oh, the joys of parenting, or oh, the sorrows of parenting? That makes sense. But what we've seen in maybe the last 80 years is this real push in the West to take that terminology and push it definitionally in a different direction, to say, as if it were, there is such a thing as a parent, someone who is neither a mother or a father. It's just a parent. And the idea is that there is parenting, that there is this genderless, sexless job of being a parent. It doesn't matter whether you're a mother, it doesn't matter whether you're a father, it's the same job. It's parenting. We both do it. It's the same exact job. So I can sit here and look at my husband and look at me, and I can judge between them, because it's not apples and oranges. It's oranges and oranges. We're both parents. We're both doing the same job. So it's very easy for me to sit here and judge what he's doing because I'm doing the same job. Now, the problem with this is biblically, this isn't true. And in reality, it's not true. And even our psychology for the last 35 years, repeat study after repeat study after repeat study says one thing. Fathering is one thing. Mothering is another thing. They're very distinct. They're both very necessary for a children's health. There isn't such a thing as you being a parent. There's you being a mother. There's a man being a father. When we talk about you together, there's parenting. We're talking about those added together. But when we're looking at an individual, that's not a parent. I know we use that language, but that's either a mother or a father. And their job is the mother or father. That's what they're supposed to do. There is no such thing as this generic, genderless thing called parenting. Now, why does that make a big difference? Well, because when most people are talking about parenting in our modern culture, full of single mothers, full of fathers who've been pushed out, full of deadbeat dads who've ran out, what we think of when we're talking about parenting is usually mothering. So we look at the husband and we say, this guy sucks as a parent, but what we're really saying is when I tell him, come and help me be a mother, help mother with me, he's not good at being a mother. Those are the kind of stories we'll even tell. Like, man, I asked him to come change a diaper, or I was so tired, I caught a cold and I was still breastfeeding the baby. And so I said, you're going to have to wake up and give the baby a bottle. I can't do it. And so all night he was bumping in the stuff and he couldn't fully wake up. And I had to wake him up because he kept sleeping through the baby crying. And all the stories we tell that the message is this guy's bad at being a parent are really stories of him not being a good mother. He's not good at mothering. He's like a pig in roller skates when it comes to mothering the kids. When the kid's crying and he's trying to soothe the baby, he's like hitting the baby too hard. He doesn't burp the baby right. When he's wiping the kid, poop is getting everywhere. He's too aggressive with all the movements. Essentially, all those judgments, when we really look at them, are he's just not very good at being a mother, is he? And the answer is, of course not. He sucks at being a mother the way you suck at being a father. You're not designed to do that job. Now, the difference is in our culture, we'll look at a man and say, why aren't you doing the mothering job? You're leaving her to do all the mothering. You should step up and help her. You should wake up throughout the night and take care of the baby too. Now, that is biologically, we know that's the mother's job. Like I know that's not a correct thing to say in our culture, but biologically speaking, 100 years ago, there was no choice about the man getting up. He doesn't lactate. He can't get up and feed the baby for that hour and a half quarterly feeding or whatever throughout the whole night. That's not even possible in the past. More to the point, we know that a man is not only not designed to make the milk, he's not designed to wake up like that. Like nobody's designed to not sleep. But women are actually designed to be able to handle that 2 or 3 year period after a baby's born better than a man. Like, did you know that a woman's brain will actually shrink during that time and it will rebound back afterwards? That you are built to be able to handle this onslaught of sleeplessness. Your husband's not designed to do that. He can do it, but he can't do it nearly as well. Well, you can wake up to the sound of that baby crying. You get that phantom cry, you hear it when it's not really there. That's because God tuned you to wake up to that baby, and he tuned your husband to block it out. They actually studied it. Fathers like have genes that kick on so they can sleep through the baby crying. You know why? Because 100 years ago, you need that man to sleep so he can get up and go out and kill something for you to eat tomorrow. He can't suck at hunting tomorrow because he can't sleep through the baby crying. He can't get up and feed it anyways, so God designed him to sleep through it. But we'll look at a man and he'll wake up, and I'm not saying you shouldn't help sometimes. I help with that sort of stuff all the time, but I suck at it. Come on, I can't wake up. Like, I don't hear the baby. I get stuck in what's happening? What day is it? Like, my wife is like awake and out of bed and doing something. And so when she's waking me up to take over, yeah, I don't look good. I suck at mothering. And if she looked at that and said, it's not mothering, it's just parenting, it would be unfair because she would be looking at me like I'm a bad father. It doesn't have anything to do with me fathering. And more to the point, if she looked at it and said, this is the job of being a parent and I'm doing all of it. Well, it's like, no, that's being a mother. You are supposed to be doing all of it. I'm not supposed to be doing it. I'm not designed to do it. I'll help, but that's a favor. That's not like, wow, he's only doing 10% of this parent. No, I'm only doing 10% of your mothering, which is actually a really nice thing if you look at it. It's not this, oh, it's not enough. See, there's two problems with it. One is we don't understand what fathering is for the most part. That's a big problem. So we look at the job of parenting and we're mainly seeing mothering, and then we're saying, why isn't he doing more of this mothering? Well, because that's not his job. His job's over here, this invisible area that we're not looking at. The other problem is historically, you would never be in this situation. Historically, you would never be a woman that gets married, gets pregnant, has a baby, and you raise that baby with your husband, just the two of you. That would never happen. Historically, from the moment you got pregnant, there would be women in your family, women in your church circle, women in your community that would gather around you to help you. Those would be the same women that would gather around you when you actually gave birth. You didn't go to the hospital. Those women would be there to get you through the birth. And they didn't suddenly leave once you had a baby. They would be there. They would fade out slowly after the next 6 months, the next year and a half, as you got more and more of a handle. As the baby needed less and less from you, they would back off. But there would be women to help you. There is too much to do as a mother. There is. It's especially when that baby's young. Nobody can give that much mothering. But usually in a traditional society, you wouldn't turn to your husband to ask him to help you with the mothering. You would turn to your sisters. Whether those are biological sisters, your mother, your aunt, all these people would gather around you and say, this is what we do. People helped take care of me when I was in this stage. And now I'm going to help take care of you in this stage. And when the day comes when your daughter or your niece or somebody has it, but you're going to come and help her get through this stage. And so who's better to help out a mom that's overtaxed? Another mom who knows how to mother. They're going to come in, and it's also self-stabilizing. You won't get a mom who will take advantage of that most of the time, because that mom, the mom that comes in and helps, is good at it. So what happens? If another mom comes into your house and mothers your kids, that's fine if it's let me take a nap. But if you overuse it, you start thinking, this woman is taking over my house. My kids are starting to look at her like she's their mother. You go, no, thank you. Thanks. That's enough help. It's self-stabilizing. It's just enough help to get you through. And then you'll be like, please go. I need to be a mom now. And that's what it is. But and this is just the way of the world right now. My wife doesn't have that. She doesn't have a bunch of family members and people coming over to help. Let us help. Let us help. That's just not culturally what we do anymore. It's sad. Industrialization, that's what happened. So what happens when my wife is burnt out, and she's burnt out a lot because she's carrying all that, I need to help her. I need to step up and help her. But a lot of times it's not being judged correctly in marriages, right? We're looking at it and we're saying, why the hell am I doing all the work anyways? And we're not looking at it and saying, well, what's the whole job? We're just looking at it and saying, here's mothering, but we're going to call it parenting, and then say, why is this guy such a lazy jerk that doesn't do any of the parenting? And really, if we looked at it, we would say, obviously, I'm the one designed to do this job. He's not. He's retarded when it comes to this. He's terrible at doing this job. I'm grateful that he will step up, and I need him to at times so I can take a nap or do whatever, or, whatever the situation might be where it's necessary. But it's a totally different judgment if we see it the right way. Now it gets even more complex than that, okay? When we start looking at what fathering is, there's a reason why people are really uncomfortable with it to a degree, especially mothers. Let me give you an example. The other day, I was on Facebook. I was wasting time on Facebook. I do that sometimes. And I saw a reel and I watched it. I also do that. Waste of time. Not really a good thing most of the time. But anyways, I saw one, and I had one of these moments where it was like, I was going to immediately like, move on, And God was like, watch it, I was like, ugh, this is cringe. It cringed me out. I didn't want to watch it, but you go like, and what it was a mother who was trying to be a YouTube influencer. Those are out there. Fathers too. But it was a mother that was out, and she was singing like a parody song. Not very good. She's doing this song kind of jingle. And the whole song was about the struggles of motherhood. I wake up at 5 a.m. and there's poop on the floor, and I'm flushing the toilets, I'm washing the kids, I'm doing this, and I can't take a nap. I don't get to take a nap. And then my husband comes in and says, I mowed the lawn. Good job. Keep on working, doing all the work. Mother, hard job, hard job, hard job. My husband goes with us to the park, and a lady comes over as she's watching him play with the kids and goes, oh, he's such a good dad. And she's like, and the whole thing is about why are they saying he's a good dad? He's only been doing anything today for 10 minutes. He just got home from work. He hasn't done anything. He's been here we just went to the park. The kids are happy to see him. They're not happy to see me anymore. They're happy to see. This is the easiest parenting time ever. And people come up, oh, he's such a good dad. I'm the good parent. He is barely here, right? That's the energy. It's deep frustration, right? But I think if we really looked at it, what's the frustration? Like even in the song, there's a couple different examples. Grandma came over, sees her husband playing with the kids. He's such a good dad. And she's like, Mom, I woke up at 5:30 this morning. And that's the energy. But what's really bothering the woman in that situation? I think it's this. Those are other women saying that he's a good dad. You know why? Because he is. Like if you were in the reverse situation, you went to the park and you saw a father playing with his kids, and you see that kid's father tank, the love tank for the father getting filled up. You see the shine that a kid has when they really need their dad, and their dad comes home and plays with them. It's only an hour, but that tank fills up. And if you're not involved in the situation, you're coming to visit that house, you see it, and that's exactly what you would say. Oh, such a good dad. Look at it. He's doing his job. He's feeding this kid. That presence of a father is coming into this kid. You could see the change in that kid's face. That's the problem. The problem is it took me 15 hours today to fill up this kid's mom tank. I bled to fill up this mom tank. And he just walked in the door and wrestled with the kids for 45 minutes, and their dad tank's full. He is such a good dad, but it wasn't hard enough, It's like if somebody comes in and they're working on the plumbing in your house, right? And they're trying to fix it, and it takes them a week, and it doesn't work. And it costs them $1,000. And then you're like, oh, what a horrible person. But then you bring in another person, another plumber. He goes in, and in 20 minutes, he fixes the problem. Everything works fine. And he goes, $1,000, please. There's some part of our brain that says, wait a minute, that wasn't hard enough for you to charge $1,000. Now, really, we should be looking at it saying, well, you got everything working. You did your job. And if you're capable of getting the job done that fast, You're worth $1,000, right? But there is some part of our brain that says, I feel more comfortable paying somebody to take a long time to do that same job than to take a short time to do that job. Like, the issue is that in God's economy, fathering is a salaried position. He's not clocking in. Nobody's watching that time but you. God's just looking at what comes out of those kids. But you're working by the hour and you're like, I put in an 18-hour day. My boss was only here from this time to that time. This doesn't seem fair, man. And you're not even looking to say, but is he doing a good job? And you're like, no, he's not doing enough work for me to even look at that. This is one of the big problems with fathering. It's super unfair. I'm not pretending like this is fair at all. But this is the uncomfortable truth we have to face. Fathering is a high yield crop. It's a low time investment deal. A father can come in and father his kid for 2 hours in a day and be killing it as a father. Usually a mom can't pull that off. Mothering's too low yield. It's a high time investment process. It's nurturing a kid. It takes a lot of time to nurture. A father's job is really testing a kid. You don't test a kid all day long. You nurture a kid all day long. You come in and test them for a couple of hours. You stretch them a little bit. They need it. It's very important. Like I said, these are important jobs that are very different jobs. But it's very hard if you're out all day sowing seed and it took you 15 hours to get 5 bushels of grain, and somebody else comes and they sow for 1 hour and they get the same harvest as you. That's difficult to sit there and be like, he got as much grapes as I got potatoes or whatever. Like, we're both bringing in 2 different things. He's fathering the kids need to be fathered. I'm mothering the kids need to be mothered. And everything's going great. They're being mothered and fathered, but I have to put in way more time and energy than he does. It doesn't seem fair. And so what's the instinct? I'm going to judge it on the input instead of the output. I'm going to be looking at how much blood, sweat, tears are you putting in, bud, instead of how well are my children being fathered right now? Is this being successful? It's a heavy thing. And we see, I'm not just talking, out of my nose here. I'm not making up stuff. This is what the Bible teaches. But maybe more to the point for people, we've known this in the psychological community for like 30 years. This is nobody really talks about, but over and over again, we've looked at the influence of fathers in comparison to time spent with kids. And it's a problem because we can look at fathers that have criminally low amounts of time with their children, and the fathering effect doesn't diminish. Like, overall, it's crazy. The fathering effect is stronger than the mothering effect. Even if everything's equal, even if the mother's spending a lot more time with the kids, the father has a bigger influence in life direction on his kids, whether it's a daughter or a son. We know this. But that's true. It doesn't depend on how much time. It's not like, well, the father has to spend a lot of quality time with the kids for that to be true. We know that even in cases where the father sees the kid like 2 weeks a year, like you're divorced, he lives in another state, and he sees the kid for 2 weeks a year, we still know that the father's influence is going to be stronger than the mother's a lot of the time when it comes to life direction. So for an example, let's say that you got pregnant in high school or whatever, and then went your separate ways, and you have a kid and he's out of state. He only sees the kid 2 weeks out of the year. We know that if he smokes, even though you don't smoke, it's way more likely that your kids are going to smoke. And if you flip-flopped it, they're living in a house full of cigarette smoke their whole life, and they only go for 2 weeks in the summer to hang out with their dad that doesn't smoke. All of a sudden you flip-flop it, they're more likely not to smoke if he doesn't smoke. If he spends time in jail, they're more likely to spend time in jail. And if you flip-flop it, he spends no time in jail, but you and your step-husband are in and out of jail, there's all sorts of criminal activity, they'll still lean more towards the father. That's true when it comes to whether they're going to get a college education, whether they're going to go to jail, how much money they're going to make tends to follow the example of the father. The same issue comes down when it's whether they're going to be close with their siblings or not, whether they're going to have a stable marriage. Like, if that guy in Arizona or whatever you had a kid out of wedlock in high school. If he goes and gets married and has one stable marriage his whole life, and you're getting divorced and remarried, your kids are more likely to follow his example. But if you flip-flopped it and had a stable marriage and he was a philandering crazy person, they would follow his example. It doesn't matter how you flip it. It keeps going to the father. Even if it's a criminally small amount of time, the fathering influence isn't affected by time. So whether it's a good influence or a bad influence, the fathering is not dependent on time. It's not dependent on, so we can't look at fathering and say, I can judge how good of a father he is by how much time he puts in. Nope. I'm not saying you shouldn't spend a lot. I try to spend a lot of time with my kids, but that's not the measure. God would have had to look at it for most of human history and say, this guy's not going to be in the same room with these kids except for maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. He's got to go out and bring home food or the family's going to starve. Someone's got to stay with the kids. We're going to have the nurturer stay with the kids. We're going to have that man go out and bring home the bacon, literally. So God had to design fathering to be able to work in small packages of time, or fathers just would never work. It would never be a workable system. If the father had to stay home all the time, if you both had to spend all your time with the kids to accomplish it, families would have starved out a long time ago. It never would have worked. So God designed it that way. We see it when we actually look at real physical examples. So you can't judge it by time. What do you judge it then? Quality of time? Strangely enough, no. Really doesn't matter what the father does. This is another weird thing, because when we look at nurturing with mothers, it's very important how the mother spends the time with the kids. If she's just kind of on her phone or watching TV or ignoring the kids, it's very, very negative. But if she's doing very nurturing things with the children, it's very, very positive. But when we look at when fathers spend time with their kids, it really doesn't matter what they do with them. Whether he sits down to do a tea party with the girls, goes out, plays catch with the son, watches TV, as long as he's still interacting with the kid and not zombied out, it really doesn't really matter. As long as he's spending time with the kids, it really doesn't matter how much or the quality, which is kind of crazy. But if you think about it, you know it's true. What do we measure fatherhood on? It's not the quantity of time. It's not the quality of time. You know what it is? It's the quality of the man. It's the quality of the man. Let me give you an example. Here's a kid, I'm going to say, 15-year-old guy gets a girl pregnant. They have a kid, he's 16 years old. Here's his baby daughter, maybe 17 years old, a little bit older. Here's his baby daughter. And he sits down, a little man child, and has a tea party with his daughter. And you're watching him do it. And you might have a little warmth in your heart, like, well, he's trying. But here's a little boy who is biologically a father playing tea party with his daughter. Then replace that with another scene where there is a man who is a man. He's a man of integrity, a man of honor. You meet him and you instantly respect him. He's strong and he's good and he's responsible and he's full of justice and integrity. And he sits down on the floor and plays tea party with his girl. They're doing the same exact job, spending the same exact amount of time. Nothing's really different, yet everything is. Why? The quality of the man is different. This is a little boy. This is a real man. Totally changes it. Why is that? Well, it's because mothering is a nurturing job. So this is the crazy thing. You could not prepare for mothering at all. Your whole life, you could just be like, I don't even know if I'm going to have kids. And then one day you find out you're pregnant and you have the baby. There's no preparation at all for this. You have the baby, you look at the baby, and as long as you are not damaged in your capacity to love other people, that is a possibility that could mess you up for mothering if you have a hard time loving other people. But as long you could be broken in 100 other, you could be not a very good woman, you could have all sorts of issues. But as long as your capacity to love is intact, you get that baby in your arms and you can be a good mother. There's nothing in the way of it. You can roll with it. The main thing it's going to come down to is, are you willing to invest the amount of time it's going to take? Because you can follow your love instincts and nurture this baby. It's just going to be a question of, are you going to log enough hours? Are you going to consistently nurture this kid enough to get a real harvest, because again, it's a low yield thing, mothering. It's how much time are you going to put into this kid? But you can be successful with almost no prep. That's not true with a father. You could have a young man coming up, and he's just as good as the girl in the sense that he's just as capable of loving this kid. He doesn't have any damage in his ability to love, but he's not a man. He hasn't really learned how to be one. He's just a little boy. He's a little man child, and he has a kid. It doesn't work. He's not going to be a good father. He's disabled from it. But if he's a good man and he has the kid, it's just like all he has to do is be a good man and love his kid, and the fathering's going to start happening, even if he only sees the kid 2 weeks a year, which isn't ideal. Even if he does, it's still going to have a positive influence. Why is that? Well, because mothering is nurturing, and you know what nurturing is about? It's about what's in the kid. Mothering is that you look at your kid and you see this incredible value, and it awakens your love, and you ensconce that kid in your love. That's nurturing. You're building a nest of love, and it's about who they are. So there are no messed up kids coming out of the womb. That kid is wonderful. As long as you're not damaged in your ability to love, you're going to see the wonderful. You're going to build the nest. It's just, are you going to be able to give enough, to put enough time in, or other competing things going to pull you away? Well, I have these dreams, and I wanted to do this, and I wanted to get a PhD. That's going to pull you away from the kid, or whether you're going to put enough time there. That's the only question. But with a man, it's a different situation. A man is not coming to nurture the kid. The man comes to test the kid. That doesn't mean he doesn't love the kid, but his love isn't like this. It isn't. He sees the kid, he loves them, he reaches out with his nest. But the difference is the focus isn't with a kid. When a kid comes to the mother, he's like, the mother sees me and she loves me, and the nurturing is there, and it's complete acceptance wherever you're at. I love you right now, with snot running down your face and poop in your pants. I love you right now, and you don't have to change, and I kind of hope you don't. With a father, when he's a man and he loves his kids, it's the same thing. He's wrapping his arms around them, but there's an inherent challenge in who he is. When a little girl comes up to her father and he's a man, she wants to win him. She will spend her day every time dad comes home, she's trying to look good for dad, and she's running up, and she wants to play games where dad fights off the monsters and scoops her up and runs off to the castle with her. That's what a season my daughter's in right now. And what is it? Kids want to test themselves against the father's manhood. It's about him. If he's a little boy, she can't test herself against a man if he's a little boy. To the quality he brings in himself, to the level that he is a good man, that's the level she can train herself on a good man. And the same thing's true of a son. He can't try to emulate his father and become a man unless his father is a man to be emulated. Mothering is a nest, and it's a nest created by a mother loving her child's value. But fathering is a test that the father loves out of his own value, his own integrity. That's the focal point. When a mother's loving her kid and mothering the kid, the focal point's the kid. When a father's loving his kid, the focal point is him. He is the standard that's being held up and saying, honey, you need to grow up and marry this. You need to learn how to honor and hone your beauty to pursue a man like this, and to be able to test a man like this, and to be able to be a wife in a relationship with a man like this. It's a whole testing thing for the daughter. For the son, it's you need to step up and become a man like this. And so that it seems super unfair, like he doesn't have to invest so much time. And that's true after the fact. After he becomes a father, you could look at it and say, well, it doesn't seem like he has to put that much time. He just spends time with the kids, and it's like his presence is filling them up. Just being with dad is enough. It doesn't even matter what they're doing, it's filling them up. And that's the problem. He goes to the park with them. He's just wrestling on the ground, and everybody can see that kid's love tank for dad filling up. And they go to sleep happy that night from 2 hours. And you're like, man, if I took the afternoon off to go shopping with my mom, I could tell putting my kids to sleep, their mom tank didn't get filled up. Like 10 hours wasn't enough to fill up the tank. And I mean, sometimes you got to do that, right? But it seems so unfair. Why does the tank fill up so fast for him? But what you don't understand is he wasn't born to that. Women are, you know what it takes to be a woman? You have your period. You're a woman. Some woman at some point in your life just said, you're a woman now. And you're like, okay, that's cool. There's no big hurdle to jump. There's no giant standard. When we look culturally and we say we're picking, like parents used to be much more involved in marriage, you weren't that worried about who your son married. You'd be looking at his wife and making sure she's not a psychopath. Big crazy things. Like she has the capacity to love, basically. Because as long as she has that, having the baby is going to take care of motherhood. As long as we're supporting her, as long as we come and encourage her the right way, she can follow her instincts and be a good mom. There's a whole other standard when parents are looking at a husband for their daughter, because they're looking at him and saying, if he's not a quality man now, he fails. It doesn't matter how much he loves the kid. It doesn't matter how much time he puts into the marriage. It doesn't matter how much he plays mom and changes diapers and does all those things. If inside he is a weak little boy running away from manhood, running away from the things that scare him, then he is just low quality. He's just low quality in everything. And so they look at, like, me as a father, when I'm going to be looking, I'm not going to be that worried about my son. I'm going to be like, let's make sure we're not marrying a girl that has obvious deep emotional problems if we can avoid it. Sometimes you got problems, she's got problems, you're both human, right? But nothing huge, nothing crazy. She's not an alcoholic or anything. It's going to be general screening. But when I'm looking for a man for my daughter, I'm not only choosing how her marriage is going to be, I'm also helping her choose who her son is going to be as a man, and in all likelihood, who her daughters are going to marry. It's going to be according to that pattern. That's why in all the wisdom literature throughout time, what are people saying to the daughters? Don't marry the handsome guy. Don't marry the flashy guy. Don't marry the rich guy. Don't marry the cool guy. Marry the guy with integrity. Marry the guy with character, because it's so hard to get it. If it was easy to have character, every guy would have it. It's a lot easier to get hair plugs in a fast car and make some money. It's a lot easier to get some abs. It's easier, way easier than to be a man of integrity and character. That guy, it may look like he doesn't have to put in a lot of time with the kids, and he doesn't. Like testing, you don't want to overdo it. But to be a man worthy of the test is a lifetime of struggle. It's a lifetime of bleeding that women, I'm just honestly, women, you're never going to understand what it takes. You're never going to understand the possibility of failure, being a little boy and a coward for the rest of your life, because you're not willing to stand between your family and the darkness. That is an incredible burden. And for a man to learn how to do that, especially in this age, to any degree, to be anywhere above the rest of the pack of man children we have nowadays, to have a man who's pushed beyond that even a little bit, who says, I want to be a man of God. I want to be somebody who's worth having around. And to see your kids get filled up on that you shouldn't leave any room in your hearts or your minds for the devil to lead you in the judgment against that, because it's not enough time, or he's not good at being a mother. No, he's not. And if you had to go out and teach your son how to throw a punch, or go play catch with him, or give him the talk about girls, you would be a pig in roller skates too. You're not good at fathering. He's not good at mothering. That's why there's both of you in it, right? That's what God designed. You can't have a baby without a man and a woman. Why? Because you need the man and the woman to parent afterwards. That's what's necessary. And if we really look at it, it changes how we view things. If we can get into this place where I'm looking at my wife and I'm understanding what she's bringing to the table as a mother, and I recognize this isn't parenting, this isn't a competition. It's not, am I a better parent or she? That's apples to oranges. I suck at what she does. And if I know that, I can look at my kids and say, when my kids spend time with their mother, I can see the mother tank fill up. And it's something I can't do. And it's something awesome. I'm so grateful that my kid's mother tank is getting full up every day. And I can praise God for that. And sometimes men are judgmental because they'll look and say, well, she's not as good at disciplining. That's a very fatherly thing. Sometimes, you can't just like lawlessness. Well, dad's not home, we're not forcing the rules because I suck at it. No, you got to back his play. You got to help each other out. But there needs to be an understanding that that's not natural to you. A mother's a nurturer. She's not supposed to be handing down the spankings. She's going to have to from time to time, but you can't judge her motherhood on that. That's her subbing in. That's her being a substitute father in that situation until dad gets home. You can't judge her and tear her down for that. And in the same way, we can't look at men trying to do inherently mothering tasks and saying, well, this guy he really isn't that great at it. There's a fly climbing right on the lens. What's happening? But we can't do that. And I think what happens is if we will get our eyes off of this false argument of who's bleeding more for this family, who's suffering more, it's a lie. Because you know what? No one suffers more than you from your perspective. You're the only one, the only person's pain you can actually feel is your own. When we say, I don't think he's suffering as much as me, what you're saying is, I cannot know what his suffering is. And you know what? Men hide their suffering. They don't want anybody to know that they're suffering. They're not going to show you it. Their whole job as a man is to carry the burden and not make it a burden to you. So when they're successful, you don't even know that they just fought a fight for you. They're not going to brag about it. They're not going to tell you about it. They're not going to come and put their head in your lap and cry about it. Women don't carry stress like that. Women are capable of carrying great stress. They're not capable of doing it without telling somebody. They got to go and they got to tell someone, oh, it's so hard right now. It's just so crazy. And why? Because your community, that's how you build community. You share burdens, but that's not how you complete a mission. You can't go out with a platoon of soldiers and say, let's talk about how scared we are before we go and attack the, no, nobody's going to go and do the mission. You have to slap each other, put that away, man, lock it up. We're going in. But the men need to come back to a community or they burn out. And without men leading the community becomes a social club that can't survive. It has no purpose besides community. And so what happens in these situations is we judge by the wrong standards. You don't know what it means to suffer as a man, just like your husband doesn't really understand what it means to suffer as a woman. That's another thing we judge each other for. Women will look at their husband and be like, we just never really talk. And when we talk, he never really shares his burdens and his emotions and blah, blah, blah. What you're really saying, we wave the magic wand over that, is what? He's not very good at being a girlfriend. He's not a very good girl. He doesn't sit and go, oh, do you know what happened to me today? And he's not good at having those conversations. You know why? He's a man. It's the same way, like if you wanted you to go and like sit down, drink a beer and watch TV, you'd suck at that too. Like you can't talk like, come on, babe, we're going to work on the car with the guys. And you wouldn't be able to do that. And he can't go to the book club with you and act like a woman successfully. It's not going to really look good. It's not going to really work. At some point you need to say, I need girlfriends for part of my life. Just like as a man, I hear men all the time say, I just can't share my burdens with her. I'm like, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to carry your burdens. She's supposed to come with her burdens and be like, babe, I got this. You don't have to worry about it anymore. You don't go to her and be like, there's so hard being a dad. It's so hard being a husband. And sometimes I'm afraid of what's going to happen. You can't go and tell your wife that stuff. You're going to blow her computer. She'll be like, he can't do it. It's on me. Like, it's not a good thing to do. I've seen guys do it all the time. They're like, well, I can't carry it on my own. I'm like, that's why you have brothers. It's the same way. Like, you go to other men that carry responsibility like that. And you talk to them. If you need a hand, you ask them. I'm overwhelmed. Can you come and help me with it? You don't ask your wife to help you carry the burdens that you're carrying for her. That doesn't even make sense. And in the same way as a woman, you can't go to your husband and say, I can't be a woman and not have somebody empathize with the journey. You do need someone to empathize with your journey. It's just crazy to think your husband's that guy. How could he ever understand what it is to be a woman or a mother or a wife? How could he ever understand it? He can't. He'll try, and God will lead him to be as sympathetic as possible. But if you want someone to really give you good strength, good advice, good encouragement, you got to go to somebody else who's making the same journey as you are. You need those women around you. A lot of our problems with marriage is we're trying to make marriage into everything in your life. There are other relationships. You need to have relationships with your sisters where you could go and decompress and talk about things and have them talk sense to you. Empathize with you and talk sense with you. And unfortunately, those relationships are in low demand and they're not really happening a lot. We really look at things fairly. And that's all I'm talking about with this judgment, is to come to the table and speak the truth. It's not that you're a better parent. It's that you're a mother and he's a father. And then if you went to God and said, really, when it comes to fathering, how good of a job is he doing? You'd be surprised when God pulls the judgment out of your eye. And you look at your husband, you're like, he's not perfect. And he's not perfect as a dad. He's not perfect as a husband. There's a speck in his eye, but it's not what I thought it was. Satan put this giant log. All I could see was log, and it was in my eye. It wasn't part of him, but I thought it was part of him. It was my judgment. And when that got pulled out and I saw him as he was, I go, yeah, he's not perfect. Neither am I. Thank God my husband isn't perfect. Because if my husband was perfect and I had problems, it'd be pretty uncomfortable. He'd be sitting there and be like, why did I marry this lady? I'm Mr. Perfect. We don't really want an ideal partner, except when we're fantasizing that we're ideal. But when we're real, we go, I earned your mistakes with my mistakes. God put us together because we're both broken and we both need help, and we need someone who can sympathize with our sufferings because they're suffering in the same way. Maybe not the same issues, but you got issues. You got anger issues. He's got these issues, whatever. But what we didn't earn is the awesomeness in our spouse. I could look at my wife and say, I earned her crazy. I got my own crazy. But what I didn't earn is all the magical things she does as a wife and a mother to make my life worth living, to make the work that I do in our marriage worth it, to bless my kids in a way I could never bless them. And if she can get out of the false judgment, and she has, and if anybody can get out of that false judgment and see it for what it is, she could look at it and be like, look, I'm not doing some weird analysis on something that doesn't matter. I'm not sitting here and saying in my own guesswork, do I think he's suffering as much as me? Because I'm really aware of how much I'm suffering, and he's very stoic. He's supposed to be. He's supposed to be hard to read when it comes to his pain and his suffering. And when you look at fatherhood, it's about being a man. There's a lot of stuff he's doing to become a man you probably don't even know about. And if you look at it and you say, I'm looking at that kid's love tank getting filled up by their dad. I'm looking at it and comparing it to all the kids I see out there that are walking around, and you see it in their eyes, the aching hole because there's no dad. And to see a quality dad, and you see your kids do stuff and you're like, man, my son is 2 years old and he has more integrity than a lot of 14-year-old boys. Where is that coming from? My daughter is a lady. Like, there's ladiness just dripping out. Where the heck did that come from? And you realize it's him. He's sharpening these kids. He's having an effect. He's calling them up, and they're responding to the call, and they're growing. And if they weren't being nurtured, they would never be able to respond to the test. But if they were only nurtured and they never had that masculine presence in their house pulling them up, they would never go anywhere either. It's us together, husbands and wives together, fathers and mothers together, that make the difference. And it's judgments like these that rip us apart and divide us. And I think if this is something you see in your life right now, don't be ashamed of it. Don't be worried about it. Don't lock up and freak out. Just take it to God and start talking to God about it. Start opening up. Look at this message. Go over it a couple of times and lift it up to the Lord. And you know what God will do? He'll peel the garbage out of your eyes. He'll pluck the wood, that plank out of your eyes, and he'll call your attention. And instead of that moment when your husband comes in and he plays with your kids for an hour, and you've been doing it all day long, and that judgment rises up, you say, shh, you put that away. You yield that over to God, and you say, God, open my eyes right now. And look at those kids and see what the fathering's doing. And I guarantee you, it's not going to be this thing where all of a sudden you're a doormat. It's going to be this thing where all of a sudden you open your eyes and you realize there's blessing here. I'm not a victim. I'm not being taken advantage of. I'm one of the lucky ones. And your guy's not perfect. Maybe you look at him and you're like, he's not as high of integrity, you know? That's always the thought. Oh, I don't know about his integrity. Believe me, I know the guys in this church, and I know they're fighting for it. And maybe that's where you need to side with it. A lot of times what we do is we think the fathering is subpar, and so we say, be more of a mother. Change some diapers. Hang out with your kids more. We try to get them in that direction. In reality, we should say, hey, keep up what you're doing, but you need to peel off some time, and you need to go and meet with Jesus, and you need to work on your issues as a man. A lot of times we do the exact opposite. We see that they're slipping as fathers, and we want to pull them out of the prayer closet, get them away from God, work more here, do more of my job. It's not the answer. I'm not saying that husbands can't help out with wives stuff. I'm not saying that wives can't help out with father stuff. I'm just saying start building up your community to help you. That's more important in a lot of that stuff. And gratitude makes a huge amount of difference. If you can be grateful for him as a father, and he can get his head, because there's a lot of guys walking around, they're guilty that they're bad mothers because they think it's parenting too. And if somebody came in and said, look, bro, you're not being measured by you're not, between work and everything else, you can't possibly put in as much time as her. You're not being measured by that. You're not being measured by how good you change diapers or how good you can wake up to a baby crying or 100 other things. You are being measured by bringing that example into your house and your kids rising to it. That's what it is. Are you, like, you can almost say that fathering is being a good man and loving your kids. If you can put those two things together without one canceling the other out, you're not compromising your manhood, your masculinity to be loving, to play female, and you are not compromising the love to be masculine. They're working together, and you have that balance where there is a good man who is truly loving those kids and looking at them and bringing all the lessons of masculinity with them, calling them up to step out and fight in life. That's the job, and you can see it. That's one of the things I think. Even that lady who made the parody song, "You're such a good dad," if she could peel off her judgment, she already can see. It's just pissing her off, but she could see that those kids are getting filled up at the park. There's something there. There's something good. And if we get on board with what's good, and then we start fighting for what's better in each other's lives, I'm going to support my husband. I'm going to help. I'm going to be a helpmate, helping him to become a better man, to be a greater man in Christ, because that's what's going to make a difference with these kids. That's what's going to make a difference in our marriage. All of a sudden, you got it, sister. That's exactly why God put you in this position. That's exactly what he's building here, is a system where every piece fits in and encourages and loves and builds each other up in love to what God wants it to be. So take that back to the Lord and pray about it, even if you are deadly sure that that's not, oh, I don't do that. I would still be like the apostles at the Last Supper. Lord, is this about me? Lord, is it me? And turn to him, because he might even take it in a different direction and point something else out. So we're going to close up our homily. I'm going to click the button for you, and we're going to go on with our service. Thanks for tuning in, guys.